on one side, there's like billions of dollars being spent in private industry. On the other side, the government appears to have some concerns, and they're doing stuff. And so, like, I'm just like, well, what is Bitcoin going to do?
What Bitcoin did is brought to you by our lead sponsor and massive legend, Iron, the largest Nasdaq-listed Bitcoin miner using 100% renewable energy. Iron are not just powering the Bitcoin network, they also provide cutting-edge computing resources for AI, all backed by renewable energy. So whether you're interested in mining Bitcoin or harnessing AI compute power, Iron is setting the standard. Visit iron.com to learn more, which is IREN.com. Okay, well, Hunter Beast, great to meet you, mate. I'm looking forward to this one.
I've been looking forward to this as well.
The quantum thing is something I've kind of ignored for a long time because I've never seen it as sort of truly an imminent threat to Bitcoin. But there's been some updates recently on the sort of quantum side that might be speeding that process up. So I want to get into everything, but I do want to frame this like I know almost nothing about quantum. So I want to go right back to the start and get into it from sort of the very basics. But before we do that, do you want to introduce yourself and why you're the person I'm talking to about this?
Yeah, so I'm Hunter Beast. I have been working in the Bitcoin space for about the past 4 years full time, mostly on the RGB project, but which is still in the works. But I've been in the middle of last year. I sort of switched gears to work on a project that I found to be a bit more how'd you say, like, just it was something that I always felt that was a concern, like a very legitimate concern in Bitcoin. Like when people bring up what people call quantum FUD, I'm like, well, like behind every piece of FUD is usually a kernel of truth, or and unless it's like very like pedestrian FUD, right? But no, this is pretty potent FUD. This has some stickiness to it, and so I mean, I think that every Bitcoiner should probably be just a little concerned about the threat that quantum computing could pose. And so I started a company called Zermatt Systems, and we later realized there was no way we didn't really have a good way to monetize it. So instead we turned it into a nonprofit. And so now we have the Zermatt Systems Foundation, and they've been, that's been kind of like the center I've been using for organizing like a BIP and some work towards some research we've been doing and some projects that kind of help with keeping an eye on the potential threat. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And when did you first like go down the quantum rabbit hole?
Well, that was like it's only been a year. But I did when I went down that rabbit hole, I read a lot of books. Quantum Computing for Everyone was one of the first books I picked up, and there were a couple other books like on like programming quantum computers and things like that. And I just wanted to get a good understanding of kind of the fundamentals and the like how they work, what they do, like kind of demystified them. And what I can say is that it is very different. Like it's similar but different. Technically, everything you could do on a classical computer, you can do on a quantum computer. They're just much more limited, and at least in our current iteration of them. But that's starting to improve as well. So, yeah, that's basically the takeaway I have from there is that they are their capabilities are more of like a superset of classical computing, and so It's almost like how graphics accelerators kind of are like they added additional capability to a computer. So they're very much uh, like a way to accelerate certain kinds of computation.
Okay. So can you demystify some of this for me? Because, like I say, quantum computing is something that I don't have a good understanding of. So, what is a quantum computer, and how is it different to a normal computer?
Yeah, so a quantum computer will generally have the capability to store uh, states as a form of probability or superposition. So they can uh, like store kind of like intermediary states between ones and zeros, and because of that, they can store practically infinite states between one and zero.
And
And
is this because the qubits can be both 1 and 0 simultaneously?
correct.
Okay, so what does that actually allow them to do?
Well, actually they can't be exactly one and zero at the same time, right? It's either one or zero, but it's a certain probability of becoming a one or zero that you're kind of um using in the circuits, like you're using like certain quantum gates that will adjust the probability of something becoming a one or a zero depending on other inputs.
Okay, and so what's the benefit of that? In even if it's in like a limited subset, what's the benefit of that over like a normal binary computer?
Well, you can run some real bangers on there, some real banger algorithms. One of them is called Shor's algorithm, and you can program in the public key for a Bitcoin address, and uh, it'll go through some steps and use it needs like another piece of memory for almost like working memory, and then it'll uh, turn that number into potential factors, factor numbers. And so the thing that secures elliptic curve cryptography um, is what's called the discrete log problem, and it's essentially a fancy name for the fact that it's difficult to factor very large numbers, to find the factors to them. And so uh, there's like kind of like this like mix of of elliptic curve cryptography and quantum computing that like it requires a good understanding of both. And I will admit I have maybe a intermediary understanding of both, but I have a sense for how it works a little bit, and then I developed some specifications as to like, once I have a decent understanding of once I had a decent understanding of the problem, what we can do to mitigate against it.
Okay, and so the big sort of problem with quantum computing, as far as I know it, is that they'll throw errors very regularly. So why is it that a quantum computer will throw errors where a normal computer doesn't in the same way?
Right. So there's noise that will interfere with the circuits, and it's because they're cooled to near absolute zero in order to entangle qubits with each other, and for that entanglement to remain undisturbed through what quantum computer programmers will do is that they'll implement error correction codes. Or in the latest Microsoft announcement, they actually are using sort of like a quasi particle to simulate a new state of matter called a Majorana fermion. And Majorana fermions are much more isolated against noise while still being able to maintain quantum states, entangled states. And so that's they need like far fewer of them to perform computation, whereas like at the Google Willow processor, they found they made a major breakthrough as well, but it took them about 7 times 7 like array of qubits, of physical qubits, to become one logical qubit. With like 105 qubits, they're only able to come up with like two logical qubits, and then with the Microsoft Majorana 1 announcement, they have 8 topological qubits, which are essentially the kind that makes use of Majorana fermions.
This episode is brought to you by AnchorWatch. The thing that keeps me up at night is the idea of a critical error with my Bitcoin cold storage. This is where AnchorWatch comes in. With AnchorWatch, you're protected by their time-locked multi-sig vault and with your own A+ rated Lloyd's of London backed insurance policy. You get to hold your keys, AnchorWatch holds the risk. Whether you're worried about inheritance planning, wrench attacks, natural disasters, or your own mistakes, you're protected by AnchorWatch. Rates for fully insured custody start as low as 0.55% and are available for individual and commercial customers located in the US. Speak to AnchorWatch for a quote and for more details about your security options and coverage. Visit anchorwatch.com today, which is anchorwatch.com. This episode is brought to you by River, the best place for Bitcoiners and businesses to buy Bitcoin. With River, you can set up zero-fee recurring buys, making stacking sats effortless. And while you're waiting for the perfect buying opportunity, River lets you earn daily interest on your cash balance paid in Bitcoin, which outperforms most high-yield savings accounts. What really sets River apart is their unmatched dedication to security. You have peace of mind knowing that River has monthly proof of reserves and holds all Bitcoin in multi-sig cold storage. And with US-based phone support, you'll always have someone ready to help. To open an account, go to river.com/WBD and earn up to $100 in Bitcoin when you buy. That's river.com/WBD. Okay, so I think you'll need to explain to me what's the difference between a physical qubit and a logical qubit?
Yeah, so a logical qubit essentially is a collection of physical qubits that are arranged in such a way that they implement quantum error correction.
So that's just reducing the noise that you get from the qubits?
Correct. And so it allows the circuit to be more stable and provide like a better answer.
Okay. And so like where are we actually at with quantum computers? Because like as far as I understand it, they're pretty tiny at the moment. They're not actually in the state that they're kind of usable. Have these breakthroughs from like Microsoft and Google, are they really substantial?
Well, they're fundamental. And what's interesting is that they've been working on this problem for over 20 years, like in a real way. Like, of course, you know, they didn't start out pouring billions into quantum computing, but they are now. And so it definitely feels like there's like like the effort's building. It's I'm forgetting the analogy, but basically it's starting to really look like they're making real progress in that field.
When it comes to Bitcoin and breaking encryption, which is obviously what this conversation's about, is this like a 5-year problem, a 10-year problem, a 50-year problem? Like where are we on that kind of trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I hope we have at least 5 years. 5 years would be really good. And like Matthew Corallo on the mailing list, he was like, no, it would be really great if we even had like 10 or 20 years to develop like the very best post-quantum cryptography for Bitcoin. And that would be like one single algorithm that does all the things we want from it as developers that, you know, like we've been able to do with elliptic curve cryptography and Schnorr signatures, and having, you know, signature aggregation that doesn't increase the size of the signature, and like elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, like things like that was like that. Like if we could have, you know, something like that for post-quantum cryptography, that would be really cool. If we could prove that lattice cryptography is like a valid way to secure against quantum computers, that would also be important. And like coming up with like just like harder hash algorithms, making sure that hash algorithms are more resistant against other algorithms that quantum computers can run, like Grover's algorithm. And so, which is good. Grover's algorithm is for, so like Shor's algorithm is for factoring large numbers, whereas Grover's algorithm is more like reversing, like getting the inputs to a black box function based on its output. And so you can essentially reverse a hash that way. Whereas with Shor's algorithm, you can reverse a elliptic curve signature. Well, public key.
Well, with the quantum computers we have today, how many logical qubits do they have like operationally running?
So like uh IBM has a quantum computer that has about 150 qubits. They've had that for a little while. You can just like, if like, they actually give out free credits every week, and you can run limited quantum computing programs on there. Or if you want to run more involved quantum circuits, you can pay them $1.60 a second, and works out to be like $5,000 an hour for running on one of their machines. And also, I'm not even sure they're even breaking even on that. Like their machines are so expensive that like even that is might be, I don't know. So and so like really we're in like maybe the like low hundreds at best, and that's for physical uncorrected qubits, but so you could implement quantum error correction codes with those qubits, but you wouldn't get much with them. You'd get maybe like 2 or 3 basically, and that
So
was
we're at
if
two
you
or
were.
three logical qubits.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and if we get to the point where these are powerful enough to break encryption, how many logical qubits do they need to get to?
About 1,500.
Okay, so that obviously seems a long way off, but do you think with these advancements that they've had, that's closer than we think?
They have made some very fundamental improvements in the approach that they're taking. Microsoft sounds pretty confident, but and hopefully the confidence is warranted. I would hate for them to be lying to their shareholders, right? Like so. There's that, and that said, many physicists are very skeptical. At least it's something I've heard, is that there are physicists who are skeptical of what they've put together. And so there's a lot of skepticism going around, and there's also a lot of bold claims, right? So, like it can be very difficult to figure out exactly where we're at. Like even if you're in the thick of it, like just reading every announcement and looking into them and listening to what other people are saying, it it it's kind of I feel like we're in a quantum superposition already.
And so one of the things that I'm unsure of is if they do manage to get to the point where they can break encryption, where does like Bitcoin fall on the list? Like, what are the first things that are going to break?
Well, yeah, that would be the signatures. So, like, the basically the addresses when you go to sign a transaction for like for coins sent to an address, you have to create a cryptographic signature and reveal your public key for that to be validated, and so for that spend to be validated, and so by other nodes on the network, and so yeah, the low hanging fruit is definitely signatures.
Are we going to see like national security encryption get broken and planes falling out of the sky and bank encryption get broken, or is like is Bitcoin going to be kind of top of the list because there's potentially such a big honeypot there?
Well, like the problem with the other systems is that if you break them, it's only going to be temporary. Like they can repair them, right? They can upgrade them. They can reverse the ledger if they wanted to. They can track down people who steal funds through the existing financial system, right? Like so, like it really is like how would you say, like just prohibitive, I would say, in terms of your rewards from if you were to target the existing system with if you're like you're a financially motivated attacker.
I see. Okay, so that makes sense. So in if it's the public-private key pair that's like the kind of low-hanging fruit, I guess Satoshi's keys are going to be like the canary in the coal mine for this.
They could be, but like the thing about Satoshi's coins is that they are spread out amongst tens of thousands of public keys, and
Mm-hmm.
so they're about 50 Bitcoin each. So it's not like one big address honeypot, right? The 50 Bitcoin is because that was the Epoch One block reward, right?
Yeah.
The bigger honeypot is probably actually maybe the Binance or Kraken cold wallets, because those have been spent from. We have the public key for that on chain, and that's the other problem. Like there are three. Generally, there are three vulnerable address types. There are pay to public key, which is what Satoshi's coins were in. There's reused addresses. So basically, any address type that you've received funds and then spent from, and then finally taproot addresses. So
Okay, so can we go through them? Because so
yeah,
Satoshi's coins are pay to public key, which was like the only address type then, as far as I understand it, which means when he was signing a transaction, the public key actually goes on chain. So why is that the easiest one to attack?
because well, I mean, they're all kind of the same amount of difficulty. It's just uh like like cause like all of them can give you a 65 byte public key, right? Or 64 byte public key. Um in terms of the math of things. But uh if you yeah, so like uh, 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 it's really all about like the amount and also how much you think you can get away with, and like maybe there's some like imitation game type theory where you'll try to take something, maybe not the big Kraken and Binance cold wallets. You'll take something like smaller, like that people aren't necessarily watching so closely, and maybe try to take that first and maximize your earnings. And then of course you'll like dump into something like fiat, which you can then depend is on, even if there is like our quantum computers attacking the system, you could depend on the authorities to protect that kind of activity. And so um it uh and there's also certain ways you can use Bitcoin uh, to like uh, for it to behave in sort of like a quantum aware way, and that like you can, if you're aware of the quantum threat, you can design certain uh, protocols for working with addresses and spends, and just like trying to avoid like spend time avoiding doing certain things to make it more difficult for a quantum attacker to take those funds. And that's something I've also been researching. But regardless, and that does not require a soft fork. But that said, the best solution, in my opinion, would be a soft fork that introduces a new kind of cryptography that's resistant to quantum computers.
Okay, so let's get into how a quantum computer would actually derive a private key from a public key. Is it just a case of it's more powerful so it can brute force it, or like how does that work?
Well, the way the Google Willow white paper described it was they observed like such a high degree of efficiency that it's not really thermodynamically possible to perform that much computation unless it has doing work in parallel universes. And
What
so
does
like
that mean?
when it's like when matter becomes entangled, like when you have like a particle that's entangled with another particle, it really does seem like that's your window into another universe.
Okay. I don't understand that though. You're going to have to explain that to me more.
Yeah, so like quantum entanglement is tricky and weird, and I'll admit I don't fully understand it other than just that, like, that's it's looking like. And also, humanity doesn't really quite understand parallel universes that well either. So it's possible that through this technology, we will discover more about like what that actually means. But that's, I mean, I can send you a snippet of the Willett white paper that it's really kind of juicy. It's like, I'm sorry, the what? You know, like I feel you. I feel you. I want to double click on that too. I think just about everybody does. Like we just don't
Yeah.
know. Like in some ways, we don't know. We only have theories as to why these computers are so much more powerful than a classical computer is.
But I mean, that blows my mind. I need to know more about that. But we know for a fact that it will break ECDSA.
Uh, if you have enough qubits that are error corrected, we know exactly the circuit that you would build to uh, take a public key, load it in, and then turn that into a private key. Now, the devil's always in the details, but that's essentially like, you know, the the threat model.
So, okay, so we know that all private keys are potentially compromised in this scenario then.
Uh, uh I would no, actually, let, let let's not jump to that conclusion. That's
Okay.
taking things a little. So, uh, anytime a public key is revealed, that would be when you're vulnerable. But
Yeah, okay.
right, but like all private keys, like uh private keys when they're turned into public keys, the public key can be hashed, right? And
Hmm.
so essentially, like if you hash a public key and you put the hash of that public key on chain, that's safe. And so any address that starts with BC1Q, that's like a native SegWit address,
Yeah.
that's going to be fine. Any address that starts with the number one, that's going to be fine, so long as you don't uh uh reuse that address. You receive funds to it, but then you spent, like if you spend from that again, then you've reused it, and like it's you've already revealed the public key for that, so it's not safe. But if you're using a HD wallet, a proper HD wallet, like a hierarchical deterministic wallet, and you are like that's BIP32 compatible, right? Like a BIP32 wallet, and it generates a new address for you each time you use one, then or even each time you request one, then you're going to be okay. It's just it's when you reuse addresses or if you're using Taproot. I think that would be another pitfall that viewers might actually be thinking about.
Okay, so if we know that the SegWit addresses are safe, then why do we need to move to a quantum resistant algorithm?
Well, because when you spend from them, a an attacker with a sufficiently powerful quantum computer could take your transaction in the mempool. That's
I
actually
see.
yeah. So like anytime you spend spend your coins, you have to reveal your public key at that point. And when you put in the mempool and like everybody can see it, then because it's on all the nodes, then that's when the attacker could go ahead and do their thing before the transaction is mined. And uh, if it even if it is mined, sometimes there are like reorgs and orphaned blocks, and those public keys are then available, and the transaction might not technically have been mined. So there's definitely like a lot of considerations when you're thinking about a potential quantum threat model.
Okay, and so this is just something that cropped up then, and this isn't like a long-term solution for everyone, but theoretically, in a world where we have quantum computers that can do this, if you were using SegWit addresses and sending transactions out of band directly to miners, would that get around this issue?
Well, yeah, except it doesn't solve for the problem of orphan blocks. But yeah,
Mhm.
like that's one that definitely increases your security substantially. Uh, the only problem is like that kind of sucks, right? Because you
Yeah.
don't have like a free mempool anymore,
Mhm.
and like it's not the ideal solution. It's one of the, like it's like there's definitely like services out there like Slipstream, for example, that you could use. Like if you were to just create the transaction hex in, say, Blue Wallet, and then copy that and then put it in a Slipstream instead. That and make sure you have a high enough fee rate for it to be selected in the next block. Then you that's a much better, much safer thing to do than just publishing the transaction to the network. But then,
But it's a shitty solution.
Like, it really it's not fair. It's not like a fair market, right? And so in order for us to like preserve the free market of the mempool, we need to essentially come up with a better one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, before we get into like the solutions that you've kind of put forward for this, what would it mean for mining?
So mining is a little different. So it depends on, like, to be honest, I haven't seen a lot of academic literature on how like SHA-256, and in particular how the how actual like Bitcoin mining based on the difficulty, right, is could potentially be compromised by a quantum computer. We believe it can be. I'm not aware of the exact algorithm that you would use, other than just that it would probably be based on Grover's algorithm. It would be using Grover's algorithm, but it would be an implementation of it that was specific for the purpose of Bitcoin mining.
And when you say compromise, does that mean that the quantum computers will be able to outcompete the ASICs that we have right now, or is it something different?
I've heard some people say they might. I've heard some people say like they might substantially. They might just be competitive. It's hard to say. Like if there might be like kind of a middle ground where they're very good, but like like one quantum computer that costs $1 million could replace 10,000 ASICs, right? Like then like we're still in good shape, because then everybody will just update to quantum miners.
Okay, so you've proposed BIP 360. Mm-hmm. Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, so BIP 360, a Bitcoin improvement proposal. There are gaps in between them. By the way, I can't say it's the 360th one. It's just BIP 360. That's what it's called. And it is specifying a new address format what they call output type. Actually, is the technical term for it. Is that starts with BC1R, and it will essentially be a hash of a public key that comes from a post-quantum cryptography signature algorithm. And so post-quantum cryptography, or PQC, allows you to basically, the way it works is it's just the whole idea behind post-quantum cryptography is just to make it substantially harder for a signature or public key to for a quantum computer to do anything useful over it, essentially. And also, to be clear, hash algorithms are much harder for quantum computers to work over than signature algorithms. And so Grover's algorithm, as I mentioned earlier, works over hashes. It scales in a way that is not as efficient than public key elliptic curve cryptography.
Okay, so like one of the big benefits with elliptic curve cryptography and Schnorr signatures is that they're very old algorithms that we've seen like tested for a very long time. Are these post-quantum algorithms new?
Yeah, so one thing is, yes and no. So, for example, the SEC-P256K1 was specified in 2000, and we've had it for 25 years now, and it's worked pretty well so far. There are a couple like post-quantum algorithms that use hashes. They're hash-based post-quantum cryptography signature algorithms. There are a couple that are even older than that, though. One is from 1977. Leslie Lamport came up with the Lamport signature that uses hashes. It's very large signature size and public key size. Total, it would be like 80 kilobytes. But they are known to be secure, and those have been around for a very long time. Similarly, there's also another one called Winternitz OTS, one-time signature, that came out a few years after that in the 80s, and that also is slightly smaller but has its own limitations. In fact, one of the limitations is that if you were to ever reuse it, people could come up with the private key for it. So that's why it's called a one-time signature. So anyway, things like that.
And this might be a stupid question, but how do we actually know they're quantum secure?
So they're believed to be quantum secure. They're believed to be hard problems for quantum computers to solve. And like, for example, if it uses a hash algorithm, we know that hash algorithms are difficult for quantum computers to solve, and in that they're more difficult than elliptic curve cryptography or factoring large numbers like RSA or an ECC. And so like the like hash algorithms are hashes are kind of like a level above, like quite a bit harder for quantum computers to solve, but they're not impossible. And so there's also been work put towards what's called lattice cryptography, and that is essentially doing like signatures in higher dimensions. And so we believe that by like increasing the dimensionality of the problem, we can make it more difficult for quantum computers to like parallelize.
This episode is also brought to you by Ledger. If you're serious about protecting your Bitcoin, Ledger has the solution you need. Their hardware wallets give you complete control over your private keys, ensuring that your Bitcoin stays safe from hacks, phishing, and malware. With Ledger's easy-to-use devices and the Ledger Live app, managing your Bitcoin has never been more convenient. Whether you're a long-time holder or new to the world of Bitcoin, Ledger makes it simple to keep your assets protected. If you want to find out more, visit ledger.com and secure your Bitcoin today. That's ledger.com. This episode is brought to you by Casa, the leading Bitcoin self-custody solution. I've been using Casa since 2019 and I can't recommend them enough. Casa have options for all Bitcoiners, from a 2 of 3 multisig to a 3 of 5 and a private client option for absolute best-in-class security. Casa also do inheritance, which I very recently set up, and it really couldn't be easier. My inheritance plan has gone from a vague treasure map for my wife to a rock-solid security plan that I have total confidence in. To find out more about Casa, go to casa.io, which is casa.io. Okay, and we'll get into exactly what this means for Bitcoin, but if we were to implement something like this, is it a like one-time thing that fixes it forever, or is this going to be like an ongoing thing?
Well, if we had the perfect algorithm, like Matt Corallo wanted on the Bitcoin Devs mailing list, then of course we'd just upgrade to that, and that would be fine. But unfortunately, we don't have that. We're not anywhere near that. We need like a good 10 or 20 more years of post-quantum cryptography research to get us like the perfect thing. And so that's why in BIP360 we actually specify 3 different algorithms, because we don't know which of them will ever prove to be unreliable. And so like if one breaks or 2 breaks, you at least have a third, right? And so it really is just like the best of what we have now. And it's essentially like BIP360, it's not perfect, but it's the best of what we have. And it's the best solution we have now. And so I just want this out there and us to have the software for it. We're actually going to build it, and we're hoping actually to have a working implementation by the end of the year. The intention ultimately is that we're not scrambling. We're not like we have like, you know, look like if there is ever a Q day, right? Like there's we come to realize that Bitcoin has been compromised by quantum computers. Then if we ever see that, if that ever occurs, then we have a way to potentially mitigate against that. And so this is good for Q-Day. This is also good for also if we just get a general sense that, like this is where quantum computers are going, and there's a growing consensus that quantum computers could be a very real concern, more than just like an 8-bit experimental quasi-particle setup, right? Like if Microsoft suddenly has 1,000 or 2,000 Majorana fermion qubits, right, topological qubits, then like that would be like, okay, guys, like we might need to we might need to think a little bit more seriously about this. Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of like your goal for this, in the ideal scenario, is it that we wait 10, 20 years, however long it needs to find like the perfect quantum resistant algorithm? Or do you think we need to move forward with 360 sooner than that? Like, what I guess the question is this like you trying to open the conversation and start something happening rather than you thinking this is the right solution?
Well, I mean, I think this is the right solution for right now if we ever need it. It's just like, it really is like anyone's guess whether we have 10 or 20, or maybe it's a complete boondoggle, right? Maybe it's a complete, like, who knows what? Like, it's, we really just don't know. And the fact that we don't know is essentially a source of fear. And I think one of the best ways to address that fear is to have a solution waiting in the wings, and basically ready to go if we ever need it, and like has actual real code and a real spec and a real implement, just like, and is, we're able to see how it works. We're able to see, like, and if there's any impact on block verification time, right? Like, or how a node scales through regular usage. If there's like things like that, I want to see that scaled on test. Like, I want to run this on a test net and see
what happens.
How this actually works with real money. Yeah.
And so what are the effects on Bitcoin from this upgrade? Is it that keys are way bigger and blocks take longer to validate?
Yeah, so blocks are bigger to validate, and they are also can potentially, in certain configurations of the signature algorithms, take a good amount of time longer to verify. Maybe not. Actually, I wouldn't say a good amount. It's actually like roughly equivalent, but like it would be something like 2 to 4 times slower, which is not terrible compared to, like, one signature algorithm we evaluated actually made things 15,000 times slower.
Wow.
And the reason why we evaluated it was because it produced substantially shorter, like smaller public keys and signature sizes, to the point where, like, we might not even need to like do anything special about, say, increasing a discount or increasing a block size, right? Like, but the problem is it makes the block, like, if a block took a second to verify normally, it would take 4 hours to verify if it was full of that kind of signature algorithm. So, like, things like that, like, aren't completely obvious at first, and then you just sort of like dig into it a little bit more, and you're like, oh no, this actually won't work. And so things like that, I want to kind of I want to make sure there aren't any obvious pitfalls, and that's why I want to actually just write the code and then get it out there and see how it works. And then we'll have a better idea of, like, if this is, a good design or not. And if it is, then we'll have potentially like a solution. And for those who are, concerned or fear-mongering or saying Bitcoin's going to die due to quantum computers, well, we can just point them to BIP360 and say, well, no, we have a plan.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned block size there. What do you have an idea of what this will do to block sizes?
Well, so that's, and just to be clear, BIP360 is a soft fork. So it's not like a wholesale increase in block size. It is essentially adding a new field to the transaction, similar to the witness. We call it an attestation. It's just a synonym for a witness, but it has different rules. And so we just need a different name for it. And so, yeah, the attestation, yeah, if you stuff it full of like, so it depends. So first of all, the attestation is a much stricter rule set. Only valid public keys and signatures. Only valid public key and signatures can go into the attestation. So they have to sign for them for the transaction, and then also they have to be committed to in advance. And although you can do like a threshold signature, and you can like kind of like put a hash there instead, and you will always still need to provide a valid public key and signature. And so that really just dramatically reduces the amount of shenanigans that can be had with a attestation versus like a witness. And so there's that. And the uh if we were to provide a 16x discount versus the 4x discount that that SegWit provided, if we were to in the soft fork we call it qubit, with a capital B, a qubit discount of 16x would result in, worst case scenario, 16 megabyte blocks when they're serialized on disk. They're not, like, it's not raising the 1 million the 1 million V byte, right? Cap. It's just fudging the math on how we account for the size of the block, the weight of the block, what they call with these terminology that they came up with in the SegWit days that we've been wrestling with ever since. But yeah, if we just like quadruple that discount, then that should be relatively sufficient for us to maintain roughly the same amount of throughput. It might be a little reduced if every transaction is a post-quantum cryptography transaction. It'll be somewhere between. So like, also one thing to understand is that because we're providing 3 different signature algorithms, we can also like, users will choose how many they want to put on their transaction or the address, really, to encumber their address with. It's almost like a multi-sig, but for in a quantum perspective. And so like, you're having like you're basically tripling. You could potentially triple the number of signatures you put on an ordinary transaction if you were like using all 3 different algorithms, if you were particularly paranoid about, when you want to go spend these coins. So like, if you are Kraken or Binance or Bitfinex or Coinbase, or MicroStrategy, right? Like, if you're one of these big institutional players with a large amount of coins that you want to secure, then you'd probably want to increase the number of signatures you include in your transaction. And so that would be something like no more than 20x larger if you use all 3. So it's somewhere between 2 and 20, depending on like how badly you want to secure your coins, like how much value you want to secure. And in a way that also leads to kind of like an MEV kind of behavior, and that like some of the really high value transactions will pay more, not only in fee rate, but also for these signatures. And also so in that way, it kind of also addresses the security budget concern, because, like, some people have proposed reducing the block size, and I'm like, well, why not just make transactions bigger?
So just to like try and put that into layman terms so I understand, does that mean that instead of having like whatever we have now, 4,000 transactions in a block, it might be 1,000 transactions in a block?
Yeah, like maybe more like 3,000,
Okay.
1 to 3,000. Yeah, like still in the thousands.
Okay, so it's not like the biggest reduction in the world. So what have the like general reception of this been like in dev circles?
Well, the developers. So there's definitely like pretty much every core dev I've talked to, or anybody who's like a long-standing like contributor to Bitcoin, is just entirely skeptical that like we're going to see we have any concern. And like Peter Woolley, right? He was the one who actually can you help me with the pronunciation of his name? You would know it.
Well, I thought it was Peter Willer, yeah. I think you got it.
Well, okay, great. So, awesome. Well, if I'm getting that from a European, then actually you're not European. You're Australian. That's different.
Well, I'm English, but I live in Australia. So
okay, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was
cool.
Peter Willer.
Okay, Willa. Okay, so Peter Willa, he's the guy who basically, for those who don't know, he implemented Taproot, or really just kind of like pushed it through along with Jeremy Rubin, but and his contributions to that. He was also one of the contributors, or like kind of like he's the lead maintainer of the SecP 256K1 implementation used by Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And
OG legendary dev.
Oh yeah, amazing guy. Like legendary dev, exactly. OG. Very talented, and he's answered so many questions I've asked on like Bitcoin Stack Exchange. Him and Merch, right? Legends, right? So Peter Willa, he acknowledges like this is a potential threat model, but he also is still skeptical that it will ever happen. And he also has recommended that we potentially confiscate vulnerable coins because it could definitely like he said, according to him, he says that it would of course we have to do this, And I'm like, wait, of course not. I don't think so. I don't think, of course, we need to confiscate all the vulnerable coins. But that's a different line of discussion altogether.
But I think that's a really interesting line of discussion. So I very briefly spoke about the quantum stuff with Alex Leachman when he was on the show. And one of the things he brought up was this idea that in like a post-quantum world, all those old coins that are vulnerable, like Satoshi's coins being a perfect example, like they've never moved. We assume they're never going to move. And in a post-quantum world, something has to happen with them. Either Satoshi moves them, which I don't think is likely, they get confiscated, like you say, or they get stolen. And I feel like there's a kind of an analogy to the Ethereum DAO hack, where it's like it's a very kind of critical moment where we have to be really careful about what we do. And I don't think confiscation is a viable solution at all.
Yeah, I think it's a terrible idea, in my opinion. That's like kind of breaking one of the original promises of freedom money, right? Like censorship resistance. And so there's that. There's also like, there is one potential compromise I've heard that, might like be a good, like, middle ground between the confiscators and the liquidators, right? And that is to restrict the spending of pay to public key addresses to one per block. And so even if quantum computers are going at it at that point, like before Q-Day, like one per block, like we hardly ever see them anyway. So like you'll be able to get it through just fine. After Q-Day, it'll be a free for all. And instead of like, there being like, a bunch of transactions going into a block, going straight to Coinbase, and it's like a sudden exit rush of liquidity, right? Instead of doing that, we could just like kind of throttle that bandwidth down, and to like just according to consensus rules, miners can only include in a valid block one pay to public key spend transaction. And so if they were to do that, then like they would smooth out basically that potential like exit. And there's like about 34,000 pay to public key keys, and so it would take like basically it would lengthen it over the course of a year or so, because there's about 50,000 blocks in a year.
So you're saying that the like general pushback from the dev community is that this is just not important. And this is something you hear a lot in Bitcoin. Like a lot of Bitcoiners just assume that this isn't a real threat. We don't have to worry about it.
I hope they're right. In many ways, I hope they're right.
Well, I hope they're right too. But what is it that you're seeing that makes you think they're not right?
Well, just that. Okay, yeah. So that was a great question. So there are, multiple billions of dollars being poured into these programs, these quantum computing programs. So there are companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Intel, Google, IBM. They all have big quantum computing programs, very well funded. They also have there's also like small startups like PsiQuantum, Rigetti, IonQ that are also looking into this. And then there's also defense contractors like Honeywell and Raytheon. And there's also a company the U.S. has. It's a really interesting company. It's called InQtel. It's apparently a
CIA.
Yeah. So so we have no idea. Also, just to be clear, if somebody even has a good enough quantum computer, because there have been some real spooks, going at this for even a longer time than even private industry has been.
Interesting. So could we put our tinfoil hat on for a second? Because one of the questions that I have is that, like, Bitcoin's obviously one part of this, but if all encryption breaks, there's no secrets anywhere, right? And so if like all government secrets were now out in the open, that's obviously a mask-off moment in a way that we can't even imagine. If we use the they, I don't know who they are, but do you think they will let quantum computing get to that point?
Oh yeah, I mean, like if like it's arguable that they already have that capability, and they're just like kind of churning through records in their Utah facility already, right? Like that could be the case. There's also I'm not sure I 100% understand your question. Like, you're saying will the authorities,
like, do the 3-letter agencies let this happen because then all their secrets are out?
Okay, so the federal government has a guideline for this. It's called the CNSA 2.0, and it's basically their roadmap for how we handle the potential threat of quantum computers. And they're basically saying that we need to stop using elliptic curve cryptography in new systems by the year 2030. That's only 5 years away. And by the year 2035, we need to have completely sunset our use of elliptic curve cryptography in government systems.
So they're preparing for this.
They are preparing for this. So there's, on one side, there's billions of dollars being spent in private industry. On the other side, the government appears to have some concerns, and they're doing stuff. And so I'm just well, what is Bitcoin going to do? Because it's not like we can just roll back the ledger, I mean, I guess we could, but that would fucking suck. And also, just to be clear, Ethereum, which is a lot more centralized governance than Bitcoin has, and regularly hard forks, they had this big hack, and they were not able to get their governance structure in a way that would reverse that flow. And it's arguable that they couldn't have, because now there's Tether and
Are you talking about the Bybit hack here?
Yeah, the Bybit hack, exactly. And they moved it all into Tether, and so the Tether bridge isn't going to want to readjust, and so there's a limited amount of time that you could roll back a chain as significant economic activity occurs on it, and at which point it might just be too late when we realize that there has been a hack that can be somehow attributed to being due to a quantum computer, even though that's very difficult to prove.
So what's your goal with this now? Is it because if the devs aren't really on board with this, is it now just an education thing for you, where you need to get out and explain what you're doing and why you're doing it?
That's essentially one of the things I'm doing. Yeah, I'm going out to different conferences and advocating for this BIP, and trying to establish support and consensus, in addition to actually implementing it. And so I hope that this is like taken seriously as a potential solution, and maybe there are better ones. I'd like to see people work on better ones because like I mean, I I've only been working in Bitcoin full time for 4 years, so I have my limitations and my understandings of Bitcoin. Even still, like you could work on Bitcoin for 10 years and you could still there's still things you could probably not know about it. And so
Totally.
it's yeah, like there's a joke that like people will start with Bitcoin before going into other cryptocurrencies to learn about them, and then they just never stop learning about Bitcoin because there's too much to know.
The interesting thing here is down to like consensus, right? Like we know that with things like CTV, which I would love to see in Bitcoin, that's like getting that implemented is going to be hard because it's not urgent. What do you think? Like, if this gets to a point where it does become urgent, do you think it's going to be easy to gain consensus, or do you think that's still going to be a big push?
It should always be a big push, right? Like it always should be a monumental undertaking to ever want to change Bitcoin. I am very much in the ossifier's camp just because like this is
Interesting.
a $1 to $2 trillion asset class. Like I would hate to break it. We have to be very rigorous and make a very good case, a very well reasoned, obvious case for it to be a no brainer to upgrade to it, right? Otherwise, it would compromise the very reason why we're here, right? So, no, I mean, like as much as I love Jeremy Rubin's work in CTV, and as cool as that is, and CSFS, I hope that I mean, a part of me is like, I hope we get that because that looks really cool. But then the
Yeah.
other part of me is like, well, but also there's like $2 trillion that we're securing here, and so we also need to be really careful.
That's interesting to hear you say you're in the ossifier camp, because I would have assumed with the work that you're doing, you'd be like a strong push for these new upgrades.
I mean, I understand them very well. I've worked very closely with a lot of people who are like in that field, and it would be very cool if we have that. But uh, like, and I wouldn't say I'm a complete 100% ossifier. In fact, a lot of people who call themselves ossifiers probably would make an exception if Bitcoin were security were completely compromised, right? So
Definitely.
like for like very like it has to be a very good reason for us to upgrade, in my opinion. Like the counter argument, of course, is that like Bitcoin could be a $10 trillion asset class only if we had covenants, something like that. And I would be like, well, maybe that could also be the case for quantum resistance. Like maybe that's what's holding us back. So like there's it's really hard to say. It's hard to predict the future. There's a lot of unknowns, and like the work we're doing is to de-risk that. I don't know if like CTV or CSFS can be de-risked more than they already have been, just because they've been around for so long.
Yeah.
Whereas BIP360 has only been around for like maybe at most, if I'm being generous, like at most maybe about a year. And so it definitely needs some more time in the oven, needs some more tweaks, needs some more like just love, and hopefully we'll follow its evolution. But yeah, we're working hard on it, and hopefully we'll have a good solution for if it ever is needed. Like and I mean, I'm a Bitcoiner first and foremost. I'm not like fully invested in this quantum thing, and so like I would be perfectly happy if quantum computers were just like this fool's errand, and like or maybe they can solve the things they want to solve with them, like simulating fusion power, or like coming up with enzymes for forever chemicals, right? Like that would be pretty cool if they could do that without also breaking Bitcoin. But that's a big if.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to say where I stand on BIP360 because, like, I don't understand how imminent the threat of quantum computers are. But if it is real and if it does turn into something, then I'm very glad that this conversation's starting. I guess that's where I'd be. I'm glad the conversation's happening, but there's obvious trade-offs to Bitcoin that unless this is a very real, very imminent threat, I wouldn't be interested in. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, like, it's just like, it really is the kind of thing where, like, I just want people to have in the back of their minds as they're reading these FUD articles, coming out, that, like, oh, Bitcoin's going to die because now we have Majorana fermions. Like, hopefully that, like, with the fact that Bit360 exists keeps people from running away from Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. So you said in the dev community, it's kind of been a bit nonchalant in terms of the response to this. Outside of the dev community, what has the response been? Are you an attack on Bitcoin yet?
Actually, what's so funny is that although I have been called an attack on Bitcoin, whenever I'm doing an in-person event, like what we just had, we handed out a bunch of hats. It was really cool. Bit360 hats. And we're going to be doing a BitDevs dedicated to Bit360 on 3/6. At least in North America, we call it March 6.
Yeah,
but yeah,
on 6/3.
Yeah, nope, different bit. But yeah, so no, Bit360 Day is we're doing a BitDevs then, and then but regardless, even the events that we had last week were people would come up to me and just thank me for the work that I'm doing, because it is a concern that a lot of plebs have. It's just a lot of people who aren't devs who are like just trying to make their way into stacking sats, and fiat mining, right? Like ordinary Bitcoiners, like if that's even a real term, right? Or like, Bitcoiners are ordinary, but that said, Bitcoiners, right, in general, are usually very grateful for the fact that I'm at least giving this potential concern the time that it needs for us to really fully understand and potentially develop mitigations against it.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, I'm definitely glad the work is happening. I hope we never have to use your work, but it looks like maybe we will. But so these events, have these been at Space Denver?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How's that going?
Oh, it's so great. We have, like, I think 78 members now, and next month is when, in April is when it'll be kind of like our 1 year mark when we first started collecting dues from members. We didn't have a space back then, and so we just kind of built a bit of a war chest, and then we got a space, and then we sometimes hold Bitcoin events. We're very picky about what kind of events we hold. Heat Punk was one of them that went very well. We had Peter Todd and Troy Cross come to that, and that was only about a week ago now, and
Nice.
that was like all those events were just so cool, and it's just going really well. And so what's interesting is that when we first started the space, we offered discounts to new members because we didn't have a space yet, and those discounts will expire next month. And so after next month, when those dues come due, and all the members, the space members, are all real close friends, I don't think anybody's gonna wash out just because we raise the prices a little bit. Then I think we will be set financially for, like, being a sustainable co-op of Bitcoiners in Denver with an actual place to hold events and meet and work.
That's amazing. So this is like Denver's equivalent of Bitcoin Park or the Commons or whatever. I think these third spaces are so important for Bitcoin. I love to see it. I'll definitely try and get out to Denver some point this year.
It would be really cool if you did. And then maybe we can do another one of these in person.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully the quantum threat is not any more severe then. But Hunter Beast, I appreciate the time. This has been good. I've definitely learned some stuff about quantum, so it's been great. Is there anything you want to say before we close out?
Oh, just go to surmount.systems. There we have a link for the BIP, and we also have some donation links for the foundation. It's a nonprofit, and so there's a silent payment link and a Bolt 12 link, and that's because we don't want to reuse addresses. And also, we don't use Nostr. We do have an X, but we don't use Nostr specifically because all Nostr npubs are public keys. So that'll be maybe another. Once we have everything figured out on the Bitcoin side, maybe we'll try to go and figure out what Nostr needs too.
We need quantum resistant npubs.
Yes.
Oh, love it. Well, thank you very much for the time, Hunter. I will try and get out to Denver at some point this year and we can do it again.
All right. Thank you, Danny.
Appreciate it.